Hello, 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 everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Shoot the Hoot RAW. I'm Chuck, or as you may know me online, Chuck from CyberHoot. And if this is your first time joining us, hey, welcome aboard. Today's a fun one because we're going to retire one of the oldest pieces of cybersecurity advice that many of us, including yours truly, has been giving for years. Yep, I'm calling myself out too. You know the advice. Watch for bad grammar. Look for spelling mistakes. If it has typos, it's probably phishing. Well, AI had other plans. And if you've noticed that phishing emails suddenly seem a whole lot more professional, guess what? You're not imagining it. The rules have changed. The good news, the solution isn't becoming a better proofreader. Not what we're doing here. It's about becoming a better thinker. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. Because here at CyberHoot, we're not trying to create employees who memorize a checklist. No. We're trying to help people build confidence, make smarter decisions, and create that positive cybersecurity culture that just puts up this wall of defense against anyone who threatens you. So whether you're an MSP, an IT administrator, or a business owner, or you're just someone trying to stay ahead of, one step ahead of the bad guys, I'm glad you're here. I'm Chuck from CyberHoot, and it's time to shoot the hoot. Let's go. All right, let's see where today's flight plan is taking us. So first up, our 5-minute rant, stop looking for typos. We're going to challenge one of the oldest pieces of cybersecurity advice and replace it with something much more useful for today's world. Then it's time for our CyberHoot Nerd Update. Smarter phishing, cleaner workflows. We've got improvements to attack fish, some cleaner reporting, a few autopilot enhancements, and several quality of life updates that should make managing CyberHoot even easier. I know it's already easy enough, but we're going to make it even easier. After that, it's time for our open mic Q&A. Can you still spot a phishing email? That's the theme. We'll answer some of the frequent questions we're hearing from customers and MSPs and separate a few of those cybersecurity myths from today's reality. And finally, our hoot-worthy horror story, the day bad grammar died. So no giant breach talked about this week, just a simple story about how one of our oldest phishing clues quietly disappeared and why that changes the way we should train people going forward. So buckle up, grab your favorite beverage. I got my water and tea here. And let's see if we can replace some of those outdated cybersecurity habits with a better one. Let's get at it. All right, now raise your hand if you've ever told someone, look for spelling mistakes, watch for bad grammar. If an email has typos, it's probably phishing. I've said it. I'm sure you've probably said it too, especially if you're a cybersecurity guy. And for years, that was great advice, really good advice. Back then, phishing emails looked like they were translated through like 3 languages using a potato. Remember, dear customer, or your account have been suspended? It's laughable, right? But today, AI fixed all that. AI doesn't make spelling mistakes. AI doesn't forget punctuation. AI writes polished, professional emails in seconds. And sometimes they're better written than legitimate emails. Trust me, I've seen it. That's a huge, huge shift. Because if your employees are still looking for bad grammar, they're preparing for yesterday's attacks, not tomorrow's. So here's today's takeaways, or flyaways, as I like to call them, right? AI writes polished phishing emails now. Bad grammar isn't a reliable warning sign anymore. It leads us to today's new rule for this slide. Verify the request, not the grammar. Because attackers aren't trying to fool your spell checker anymore. No, they're trying to fool you. So if grammar isn't the giveaway anymore, what should you be looking for? Let's talk about it. So the answer is surprisingly simple, right? Most things are. Stop verifying the grammar. Start verifying the request. Think about it. If your CEO sends you an email asking you to wire $50,000, does perfect grammar make the request more legitimate? Nope. If your bank emails you asking you to confirm your password, does a beautifully designed logo suddenly make that okay? Of course not, right? No. The danger isn't in how the email is written. It's not about that. The danger is in what it's asking you to do. That's the mindset shift AI is forcing us to make. So instead of asking, do they spell immediately correctly? Start asking, is this request unusual? Is someone creating urgency? Is this asking me to bypass our normal process, right? Those are the questions that stop modern phishing attacks, because attackers know something. They know when we're rushed, we stop doing? We stop thinking. And when we're curious, what do? We click. And when someone appears to have authority, we also don't even question it. That's not a technology problem, folks. That's human psychology. That's exactly what attackers are counting on. So today's flyaways from this slide. Question unusual requests, right? Question unusual requests. Pause when an email creates some urgency. And today's rule for this slide that we're trying to take away here, verify the request, not the message, not the message. Because a perfectly written phishing email is still a phishing email, right? So if an email tells you, don't tell anyone, it might be your first clue you should tell someone, right? So now we know what to look for, but how do we train people to think this way every single day? Let's see. So I've thought about this, and here's the bigger question. How do we actually prepare people for modern phishing? The answer isn't giving them a longer checklist. That won't work. It's teaching them how to think. Teaching them how to think. Because attackers, they don't win by writing better emails, right? They don't win by writing better. They win by getting us, you and me, to make fast decisions. Think about almost every successful phishing attack. There's usually some kind of pressure involved, right? Act now, or your account expires today, or approve this login, or update your payment information. The goal isn't to give you time to think. The goal is to keep you from thinking. That's why one of the best cybersecurity habits isn't technical at all. It's simply just slowing down. Take a breather. A 10-second pause has probably prevented more cybersecurity attacks than most people actually realize, because the pause gives your brain time to ask, does this make sense? Is this normal? Should I verify this another way? And here's the good news. Those are skills. It's not a talent, right? Anyone can learn that. And that's why I love positive reinforcement, because we shouldn't be celebrating every time an employee, that they never click. No. We should celebrate them because they stop, they think, and they verify. Those are habits worth building. So today's flyaways are simple on this slide, right? Slow down before you respond. Verify those important requests using another method. And that new rule to think from this slide, I want you to pause. I want you to think. I want you to verify. That's the biggest thing right there. Pause, think, verify. You'll stop a lot of these attacks from even happening. So confidence beats compliance, because we don't want employees who blindly follow rules. We want employees who make smart decisions. That's what actually stops modern phishing. So if an email tells you this is your final warning, but you've already received like 6 final warnings this month, it might not be that final, right? So cybersecurity isn't about spotting that bad English. It's not about, that pressure that's there. It's about making better decisions. And that's something AI can't do for us. So speaking of smarter decisions, let's take a look at what we've been working on this week at CyberHoot and see what we've got new for you. All right, our nerd update. Time for this week's nerd update. This week's theme is simple: making phishing management smarter, cleaner, and easier to administer. So let's start with attack fish. So we continued refining both the reporting experience and the training experience. So one of the biggest improvements that we've done is we standardized how compliance percentages are calculated. That means your reporting is now more consistent and better reflects real training progress, right? So we've also cleaned up several attack fish experiences. We want to make things optimal, and through iteration, we make things better and better, right? So we fixed reporting inconsistencies. We've improved support for deactivated Hootfish templates. And we've made an intentional change to remove that automatic remedial video assignments we would give after someone clicks a phishing simulation. Why assign them a video, right? Why? Because if you watched last week's episode, I hope you did, you probably know the answer. We're focused on coaching, not punishment. Training should encourage learning, not feel like detention, right? So think about it. Oh, I failed a phishing test. What do I get? Boom. More videos to watch. Thank you for that. Appreciate it. Not anymore. Boom. Next, over in the autopilot interface, we've added a much more visible enter ID and doodle ID sync failure banner. That way, if your synchronization somehow stops working, administrators will know immediately instead of discovering it later. So we also made a small usability improvement by moving that tenant logo into the actual breadcrumbs now. This gives organizations with longer names a cleaner interface and more room where it matters. And finally, we fixed an issue affecting the cyberhoot.com/login to make sure users can get to where you get to reliably. So if you have a little bit of issues with that, a little bit of spottiness, a little bit worse sometimes doesn't, fixed. So really nothing too flashy this week, but lots of quality of life improvements that make managing CyberHoot just a little smoother every single day. All right. Enough about what we've been building. Let's answer one of the biggest questions people are asking now that AI has changed phishing forever, right? But first, did I do this? Did I throw it out there? Boom. Be the first to email typos10 to shootthehoot@cyber.com and get 10% off your next invoice. Type it in, click send, and get that 10. If you're not watching live, no worries. Email us anyway. I might just give you that 10% off. I'm a nice guy like that. The only catch is we're limited to this discount once a month. It was fun. I was thinking about maybe even doing the typos, like making the typo a typo, but I didn't go that far with that. I didn't want to do that to you guys. All right. Good stuff. All right. Thank you, Nick. See your comment there. Let's keep it moving. All right. Oops. Sorry about that. Very much. Doom, 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 doom. Here we go. Nerd update. Let's keep it moving past our nerd update to our Q&A. All right. Q&A time. All right. So it's time for open mic. All right. If you have any questions, please throw them in the chat there so we can get more feedback and more questions into the platform. As always, I have 3 questions that I hear most often whenever AI and phishing come up, ready to get us started. So I'm always primed and ready. So let's just start with the first one here. Are spelling mistakes still a good indicator? We still have spelling mistakes, that spelling mistakes checked still in our HootFish template. And guess what? They're still an indicator. They're just not really a reliable one anymore, right? If you see terrible grammar, definitely, absolutely pay attention. But don't assume that perfect grammar means an email is safe. No, there's bad grammar like, I don't know, smoke, right? So if you see smoke, something might be wrong. But just because you don't see the smoke doesn't mean there isn't a fire. So eyes open, look for it, but you have to evaluate it, right? Next question. Boom. Can AI write convincing phishing emails? I know it's funny, like, AI's come such a long way, and they absolutely can write very, very, very convincing phishing emails. Once you get past the prompt that says, hey, we can't do that, once you figure out a way around that prompt, absolutely. In fact, that's one of the biggest changes we've seen over these past couple of years. AI can now write polished emails, personalized messages, professional formatting, fluent English in just a few seconds. And it can actually go out and look at social media and tailor the message to you. So attackers no longer need to be good writers or good researchers for that matter. They just need to be good at asking AI, which is why teaching people to look for typos is becoming a little bit less effective every single year. All right. Next question here. So quick question came in. What's the new pause and verify checklist if the email looks perfectly written? So that pause and verify. So what basically happens is when you're going through, when you're reading that email, I don't know about you guys, but what happens for me is something seems a little bit off. The spidey sense starts tingling a little bit, and I'm like, something doesn't seem right. So you know what I do? I fall back to my pause. I pause, something doesn't feel right. Let me just stop a second. And then I think back to my HootFish training, and I automatically go up and look at the sender. What's the sender look like? Then I look at the greeting and so forth. And most of the time, I would say 95% of the time, we can knock it right out then and there. But if they're asking for something more, if you can't really knock it out with those other indicators, what you want to do is, if John from accounting is asking, or John from management is asking you to send out $50,000, have an out-of-band confirmation for that, right? What you want to do is you want to say, hey, look, I get you, John. I'm just going to call you directly on a number I know is good to verify. Or I'm going to have to walk down and talk to you real fast to make sure this is good. You're good with that? And guess what? Good cybersecurity culture is not only good with that, they actually welcome it. So what's that checklist? First, pause. Verify. What's next? Verify. Verify. Look at your indicators. Can you verify it from there? Nope. Boom. Talk to someone, right? All right. Out-of-band method. Good question. All right. Let's keep it moving. Third question I had already planned for you guys too is, should users trust perfectly written emails? No. And honestly, guess what? Never should have. Good writing has never been proof that an email is legitimate, ever. It's just used to be that bad writing was really, really an obvious clue. So today, the better question is, does this request make sense? Should I verify it another way? Would I normally receive this request? So those questions will stop far more attacks than checking someone's punctuation. Think about it like this. I've seen legitimate emails with more spelling mistakes than phishing emails. I'm looking at you, Carl. Those Monday morning emails before coffee, not your A-game, right? So I get it. Attackers have changed. AI has changed. Our advice has to change too. Don't train people to become grammar teachers. That's not what we're doing. Train them to become good decision makers. That's a skill they'll use long after today's phishing techniques have changed again. So, speaking of phishing techniques changing, let's finish with a real story that perfectly illustrates why perfect writing is no longer the problem. Let's go over to our horror story. I'll take this off. All right. The day the grammar dies. So let's finish episode 50. This is our 50th episode, by the way. Pretty cool. With today's hoot-worthy horror story. So only this one isn't about a company. Usually we do things about companies or breaches. This was not about that. This is about an idea. So for years, one of our best defenses against phishing was simple, bad grammar, or the notorious Nigerian prince, right? But I digress. Honestly, it did a lot of work for us. We saw terrible spelling, we saw weird formatting, we saw broken English, right? Sometimes that phishing email practically introduced itself, right? But then something happened, something special happened. AI showed up, and guess what? It's not going away. And then almost overnight, every scammer gained access to a world-class writer. No English degree was required, no marketing team required, just a good prompt, right? So today, security researchers are seeing phishing emails that are polished, professional, and often nearly indistinguishable from legitimate business communications. The grammar isn't always the giveaway anymore. The request is. That shift is one of the biggest changes that we're seeing as security awareness professionals and that we've faced in years, right? That's why I say pause. The day the grammar died was also the day cybersecurity training had to evolve, right? Because the old advice wasn't wrong. It wasn't wrong. It's just not enough anymore, all right? Still pay attention to those typos and stuff, right? Someone could argue, typos make things more legit nowadays, right? But the future of security awareness isn't teaching people to become editors. That's not what we're doing. We're teaching people to become critical thinkers, to pause, to verify, to ask one more question before they click. So let's be honest. Let's be honest here. I've seen internal company emails with more typos than some phishing emails, which means grammar has officially retired as our security consultant. Technology changes, attackers change, AI changes. Good judgment, it doesn't change. So if there's one thing I hope you remember from episode 50, it's this. Don't verify the grammar. Verify the request. Because that's a habit that will protect you no matter what AI invents next. You'll be prepared. All right, let's wrap this up. So that was episode 50, our 50th episode, right? And if there's one thing I'd love for you to remember, it's this. We used to teach people to spot bad emails. Today, we need to teach people to question good ones, right? Question those good ones. Because AI doesn't make phishing easier to recognize. It makes critical thinking more important than ever. So next time the email lands in your inbox, don't ask yourself, did they just spell anything? Is there any spelling mistakes? You have to ask yourself instead, does this request make sense? Would I normally expect this? Should I verify it another way? I gotta be honest with you. Someone sends me an email, says, Chuck, go out and buy 50 Apple cards and send it out to our partners. I'm gonna be like, I'm not the guy. Why is it coming to me? It doesn't make sense. Ask yourself questions. Those 3 questions that I just said will protect you far longer than any checklist ever will. And that's really what CyberHoot's all about. Not teaching people to memorize red flags, not our goal, but we're helping them build the confidence to make smart decisions. Because cybersecurity isn't about being, having perfect eyesight. It's about having good judgment. So I appreciate you all spending this few minutes today with me. If you found this episode to be helpful, share it with a coworker, share it with your IT team, or someone who still thinks spotting typos is enough. Until next time, I want you to laugh, I want you to learn, and I want you to hoot up. Hoot up!